The Duke of Arson was working when I decided to ruin both our mornings. He sat behind his enormous mahogany desk, all polished menace and poise, signing documents with the precision of a man who'd memorized every detail of his own empire. His dark hair fell just slightly into his eyes, catching the firelight from the hearth. The scent of ink, parchment, and faint smoke filled the air. I'd like to say I entered gracefully, but the heavy oak door announced me with a rather unladylike thud. He didn't even look up. "Lady Arson," he said, voice calm, deep, and annoyingly smooth. "To what do I owe the pleasure of this unannounced visit?" I took a breath. I want a divorce. That got his attention. His quill froze mid-signature, ink pooling into a small, perfect blot on the page. Then, slowly, he looked up, gray eyes glinting with something that could only be described as dark amusement. "A divorce," he repeated, as if I'd just offered him a cup of tea instead of my freedom. "And why, pray tell, would you want that?" "Because this isn't my life. Because you're supposed to be a villain. Because I'm supposed to die horribly." None of which I could say, of course. Instead, I clasped my hands neatly in front of me, like the proper villainess everyone believed I was. "Because I find this marriage unsatisfying." One of his eyebrows arched, a precise little motion that somehow managed to drip arrogance. "Unsatisfying? My dear Duchess, I wasn't aware this was a contract of amusement." "Oh, please," I muttered under my breath, rolling my eyes. "It's barely a contract at all." His lips curved, not quite a smile, but close. "And yet it binds you quite securely." I opened my mouth to retort, but he raised a hand, already turning back to his documents. "Denied," he said simply. "Close the door on your way out." I blinked. "I what?" He didn't even glance at me. "Denied. Do be careful not to slam the door. It offends my sense of order." The audacity of this man. It was only when I stormed out that I remembered who I was, or rather, who I was. I wasn't her, not anymore. I was a 25-year-old university graduate who'd fallen asleep reading a ridiculously long historical romance/tragedy called The Knight's Devotion. I remembered mocking the main villainess, Arya Klaus, the infamous beauty who'd ruined everyone's lives before getting her poetic punishment. I'd called her dramatic, petty, a menace to indoor furniture, and gone to bed with my laptop still open. And then, well, I woke up in her body. In her marriage bed, to be exact, beside Duke Felix Arson, the secondary villain of the novel. A man whose smile could make diplomats tremble, and who, according to the book, managed an underground network so secret even the author barely hinted at it. He was the epitome of calm, composed evil, and somehow better looking in person, which was very inconvenient for my peace of mind. I'd landed in the story right before everything went to hell. At this point, Arya had earned her reputation for cruelty and temper, but hadn't committed her final crimes yet. Meaning, I still had time to fix things, to rewrite my ending. And divorce seemed like a logical start. Except apparently, Duke Felix, absolutely not. Arson wasn't interested in setting me free. When I returned to my chambers, my maid Clara nearly fainted from my expression. "You saw his grace, didn't you?" she asked cautiously, clutching a tray of tea like a shield. "Yes," I sighed, collapsing onto the chaise. "And he refused my entirely reasonable demand." "Reasonable, my lady." "Perfectly. I requested a divorce with utmost civility and minimal furniture destruction. Progress, if you ask me." She set down the tray, clearly trying not to look amused. "His Grace rarely agrees to requests he didn't make himself." "Of course he doesn't." I threw an arm dramatically over my eyes. "He's insufferable, charming, infuriating, a walking tax audit." Clara made a strangled noise that might have been laughter. "Shall I bring more tea?" "Yes, something poisonous if available." Later that afternoon, I decided to visit the stables, not because I liked horses, but because I'd learned it was the only place where Felix rarely appeared. He wasn't one for mud or public displays of affection or emotions in general. At least, that's what I thought. Until I found him there, sleeves rolled up, speaking to a stable hand about grain quality. He turned at the sound of my boots crunching on straw. "Lady Arson," he greeted smoothly, as though our morning exchange hadn't happened. "Have you come to assassinate me?" "Tempting," I muttered. "I just wanted to breathe air that wasn't filtered through your ego." He chuckled. I didn't know villains could do that. "Be careful, my dear wife. You'll ruin your reputation if people see you walking among commoners." "Oh no," I gasped, feigning horror. "Will the world finally realize I'm not as wicked as they think? Whatever shall I do?" He tilted his head, eyes sharp with interest. "You're being unusually talkative today." Side effect of being trapped in a miserable marriage. He stepped closer, brushing invisible dust from my shoulder. The gesture was deceptively gentle, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "If it were truly miserable, you'd have left by now." I froze. For a moment, neither of us moved. His gaze held mine, too intent, too knowing, and I hated how my pulse stuttered. Then he smirked and stepped back. "But you haven't. Curious, isn't it?" That night, I lay awake, staring at the ornate ceiling. Felix Arson was not what the book had described. He was supposed to be cruel, calculating, consumed by greed. Instead, he was calm, maddeningly patient, and far too observant. If I wasn't careful, he'd start noticing that I wasn't the same Arya either. That I flinched at cruelty, hesitated before speaking, and sometimes looked at him with, well, confusion. Still, one thing was clear. He had his own secrets. He didn't want a divorce, not because of affection, but because my villainous reputation served as his perfect camouflage. The more society feared me, the more invisible his dealings became. Fine, if that's how he wanted to play this game, I'd play it too. For now, the next morning I was at his study again. He looked up from his papers, one brow already raised. "You're persistent." "Determined," I corrected. "I've decided that if you won't grant me a divorce, I'll simply outwit you." He leaned back in his chair, amusement flickering across his face. "By all means, Duchess, do your worst." "Oh, I intend to." His smirk widened. "And here I thought you already had." I turned on my heel, before he could see the traitorous flush rising in my cheeks. This marriage was going to kill me, again. Being the most hated woman in the Empire wasn't as glamorous as it sounded. It came with certain inconveniences, like people dropping their teacups when you entered a room, servants accidentally forgetting to bow, and the Duchess of Marin clutching her pearls whenever I so much as breathed near her husband. Honestly, exhausting. Still, I decided to start small. If I was going to rewrite my fate, I'd have to convince society that Arya Klausarson wasn't the fire-breathing demon they believed her to be. So I planned my redemption carefully. Step 1, be nice. Simple, right? It began at breakfast. Felix was already at the table, reading reports, all quiet intensity and infuriating poise. His black coat was perfectly tailored, his tie fastened with military precision. Even his coffee drank itself in silence, I swear. "Good morning, Your Grace," I greeted, with an overly bright smile. He looked up, brow arching. "You're cheerful. Should I call for a physician?" "Huh, I've decided to be pleasant today." He sipped his coffee slowly. "Should I be alarmed?" I ignored that. "I'm going to the orphanage in the capital. I'll be donating blankets and bread." He lowered his cup, studying me. "The same orphanage you threatened to flatten like a pancake last winter." "That was contextually justified," I said defensively. "They accused me of kidnapping a duck." "Ah, yes," he murmured. "The infamous duck incident. Truly, your reign of terror was unmatched." I scowled. "I'm trying to be good." He gave a mock bow from his seat. "Then heaven help us all." 3 hours later, I discovered that being good was awful. Children screamed. Flour exploded. One boy set my sleeve on fire because he thought I smelled rich. The head matron nearly fainted when I tried to carry a basket myself. By the time I returned to the carriage, my gown was streaked with dirt, and my soul had left my body. Felix was waiting in the entry hall when I arrived, the picture of composure. He took one look at me and smirked. Did the orphans revolt? Go ahead, laugh. He didn't. He stepped closer, brushing something off my cheek, a smudge of flour, maybe, or the ashes of my dignity. No, I think it suits you, he said softly. What? Looking human. My breath hitched. He turned away before I could answer. The next week, I attended a royal banquet, my first public appearance since the infamous divorce refusal incident. The hall glittered with chandeliers and murmured scandal. Every noble lady in sight stared like I was an exotic predator behind glass. Felix stood by my side, his hand resting lightly at my back, possessive, protective, practiced. I could almost hear the whispers slithering through the crowd. That's her, the Duchess who bewitched the Duke. I heard she tried to seduce the Crown Prince. They say he rejected her, and now she's plotting revenge. I wanted to scream none of that is true, but of course, it was in the novel. Arya Klaus fell in love with the Crown Prince. She destroyed everything for him, and when he didn't choose her, she went mad. I looked across the hall. The Crown Prince, tall, golden, painfully noble, was smiling politely at his guests. He looked exactly as I remembered from the book. Perfect, heroic, boring. Felix noticed my gaze. His fingers tightened ever so slightly at my back. Admiring His Highness, he asked quietly. I'm just thinking, I said quickly, about how strange it is to see him up close. He hummed, strange or nostalgic. I blinked at him. Excuse me. His tone was deceptively light. Rumor has it you used to follow him around like a lovesick debutante. I nearly choked on my wine. That was the old me. Ah, the villainous you. The utterly misunderstood and emotionally complex me, I corrected primly. His lips curved into a dangerous smile. Of course, my dear Duchess. He was teasing me, but beneath the teasing I heard it. That flicker of something possessive, unsettlingly real. Later that night, after the banquet, I sat by my vanity, unpinning my hair. The whispers still echoed in my head. The old Arya really had loved the Crown Prince, pathetically, destructively. And now I was wearing her face, living her life. People saw me and saw her sins. I didn't even realize Felix was at the door until his reflection appeared behind mine in the mirror. You were quiet tonight, he said, stepping closer. Maybe I've learned that words don't change anything. He tilted his head. On the contrary, you've changed quite a lot. I met his gaze in the mirror, for better or worse. He leaned down, close enough that his breath stirred my hair. For my inconvenience, mostly. I swatted at him, flustered. Do you ever stop teasing me? Not when you're this easy to tease. Go away. He lingered long enough for my pulse to betray me, then straightened with that infuriating smirk. Good night, my wicked Duchess. When the door clicked shut, I caught myself smiling. And maybe that was the scariest thing of all. The next morning, I woke up to find my name in every paper. The Wicked Duchess and her royal obsession, seen again near the Crown Prince. Scandal at the winter banquet. Is the Duke's wife seeking a new throne? I stared at the headlines, then at Felix, who was calmly buttering his toast like the Empire's reputation wasn't currently collapsing around us. Did you see this? I demanded. They're calling me a royal temptress. He didn't look up. A promotion from public menace. You're climbing the social ladder. I am being slandered. I'm impressed you can still be surprised. I threw a roll at him. He caught it effortlessly, smirking. Feisty. Perhaps you should visit the palace again, give them more material. I will not. I stopped mid-rant because his expression had changed. The humor was still there, but underneath it, cold, calculating steel. Arya, he said softly, setting his knife down. Do not go to the palace, not alone. Something in his tone made my pulse skip. Why? You think I'll throw myself at the Crown Prince again? He leaned back, voice deceptively calm. No, I think people might start wishing you dead. That day, the manor felt different. The servants bowed too deeply, the guards doubled in number. Felix's study door, usually half open, was shut tight. By evening, I was restless, curious, and a little afraid. So naturally, I snooped. The door wasn't locked, his first mistake. Inside, papers were scattered across his desk, sealed letters marked with the royal crest, and a map with routes drawn in black ink. At the center of it all, the crown prince's name, circled twice. I froze. "Curiosity," came his voice behind me, low and amused, "will get you killed someday." I spun around. Felix stood in the doorway, jacket unbuttoned, tie loosened, his usual composed elegance replaced by something darker. "Felix, I was just..." Breaking into my private study, he took slow, deliberate steps forward. How adorable. "I wasn't breaking in," I protested. "I was investigating." "Ah, my brilliant wife, the detective." His tone was teasing, but his eyes were dangerous. He stopped inches from me, gaze flicking to the papers. "You shouldn't touch things you don't understand, Arya." "Then explain it," I shot back. "Why is the crown prince's name on your desk? What are you planning?" A pause. Then, with the kind of calm that only made him more terrifying, he said, "Protecting you." My breath caught. From what gossip? He leaned in, lips almost at my ear. "From being used, from being watched, from becoming someone's pawn again." The way he said again made my chest ache. Like he knew. Like he'd read the same novel I had. "Felix," I whispered, "you're hiding something." His lips curved into a sharp, knowing smile. "Of course I am. You married a man the Empire calls a villain, remember?" He brushed past me, retrieving the letters from his desk. "But tell me, my dear Duchess, would you rather have a villain on your side or at your throat?" That night, word spread through the court. The crown prince had publicly declared he pitied the duke's wife for being misunderstood. I wanted to scream, pity, from the man who, in the novel, destroyed her. But before I could stew in my rage, Felix appeared in the doorway, coat draped over his arm. "We're going out," he said curtly. "To the gallows." "To dinner." "That's worse." The restaurant was filled with nobles, all whispering as we entered. Felix didn't flinch. He held my hand, held it, publicly, and smiled like the entire empire didn't despise us. "Smile," he murmured through his teeth. "Let them choke on it." I smiled. Oh, how they choked. Halfway through dinner, a familiar voice called out, "Your Grace, your ladyship." The crown prince himself approached our table, perfect as ever. My stomach twisted. Felix stood, bowing slightly. "Your Highness." The prince's gaze flicked to me. "Duchess Arson, I hope the rumors haven't distressed you. You know how the court can be." "Oh, you mean the one where I bewitched you with my evil feminine wiles?" I asked sweetly. "No, that one was delightful." The prince flushed. Felix nearly laughed, nearly. But when the crown prince's gaze lingered on me a moment too long, Felix's hand slid to my chair. Protective, possessive, a warning. The prince hesitated, then excused himself. When he was gone, I hissed, "You didn't have to terrify him." "Didn't I?" Felix said, entirely unrepentant. "The man should learn not to flirt with other men's wives." He wasn't flirting. Felix leaned back, his smirk returning. "No, shame. I almost enjoyed being jealous." My heart definitely skipped. "You what?" He reached across the table, brushing his fingers lightly against my hand. "Relax, Arya. It's just a game." "Right," I said, trying and failing to sound composed. "A game." But when I met his eyes, warm and sharp and endlessly unreadable, I wasn't sure who was winning anymore. I had 3 rules for surviving as Arya Klaus. 1, don't fall for the crown prince. 2, don't die. 3, don't ask your husband questions when he's smiling. I broke all 3 by Tuesday. The rumors hadn't cooled. If anything, they'd evolved. I was now the Wicked Duchess who seduced the crown prince and plotted to overthrow the empire. Which was impressive, really, considering I'd spent the entire week locked inside the mansion, arguing with the wallpaper. Felix, meanwhile, was as unbothered as a cat in the sun. When I stormed into his study, waving the latest gossip pamphlet, he didn't even look up. "Apparently, I've been seen consorting with dark mages," I snapped. He murmured. Were they polite? I glared. This isn't funny. He smirked. It's a little funny. I'm the Empire's villainess, Felix. You're supposed to help me clear my name. I am, he said smoothly, setting his pen down. By keeping you indoors and alive, you're welcome. You're infuriating. He smiled lazily. You married me. Whose fault is that? Later that night, I couldn't sleep. The moonlight stretched through the curtains, silvering the room. The mansion was quiet, too quiet. And then I heard it. Voices. Faint low coming from the east corridor, Felix's private wing. Every instinct screamed don't. Naturally, I grabbed a candle and followed the sound. Through a half-open door, I saw them, Felix and 3 hooded men. On the desk lay stacks of parchment and a sealed royal insignia I recognized from the archives. One man whispered, Your Grace, the Crown's investigation has reached the border. They suspect the smuggling routes. Felix's reply was calm, calculated. Then change the routes, double the guards, and if anyone touches the Duchess. He didn't finish. He didn't have to. The room went still. I pressed a hand to my mouth. Smuggling routes, guards. Oh, my God. My husband wasn't just morally questionable. He was running a whole shadow empire. And apparently, protecting me was part of it. The next morning, he was all smiles at breakfast. How did you sleep? Like someone married to a criminal, I said sweetly. He froze. Pardon. I crossed my arms. Smuggling, hidden meetings, men in cloaks, ring any bells. He sighed, setting down his cup. I told you not to eavesdrop. I didn't eavesdrop, I said primly. I investigated. Ah, yes, my wife the detective, he drawled. And what exactly do you think I've done? Illegal things. He tilted his head. Specific. Fine, you're running the underworld. He said after a moment, utterly unbothered. That's one way to put it. My jaw dropped. You're not even denying it. He smiled faintly, leaning forward. And what will you do, my dear wife? Report me. I hated how his voice could sound like velvet and a threat at the same time. I should. You won't. And why not? Because, he murmured, eyes glinting with wicked amusement, you enjoy being my accomplice. I opened my mouth and promptly closed it because, damn him, he was right. Later that day, a letter arrived, sealed in gold, from the Crown Prince. Felix read it once, expression hardening. What is it? I asked. He looked up at me, face unreadable. An invitation to the palace. My stomach dropped. A trap. Most likely. And you're going to let me go. He smiled, sharp, dangerous, far too beautiful. Of course not, we're going together. That evening, as I stood before the mirror in my midnight blue gown, Felix appeared behind me, adjusting his cufflinks. Our eyes met in the reflection. You look beautiful, he said simply. I blinked. Thank you, wait, no, you're distracting me. This could be dangerous. He stepped closer, so close that his breath brushed my neck. Everything worth having is. Felix. He smirked, voice low. Besides, you said you wanted to clear your name. Consider this your stage. The palace glimmered like frost and secrets. As we entered, whispers spread like wildfire. The Duchess and her wicked Duke walking arm in arm, unashamed. The Crown Prince greeted us with that same too-perfect smile. Duke, Duchess, you honor me. Felix bowed, polite but distant. Your Highness. The tension between them was thick enough to slice. When the prince took my hand to kiss it, Felix's jaw tightened. He didn't speak, but the air itself seemed to obey him, colder, heavier. And for the first time, I realized just how dangerous my husband truly was. Later, when we danced, Felix leaned close, lips brushing my ear. Careful, Arya, he murmured. The palace is full of predators tonight. I met his gaze, including you. He smiled, that beautiful, infuriating smile. Especially me. I had promised myself I wouldn't drink at the royal banquet. And yet here I was, clutching a crystal glass like it was holy water. In my defense, Anyone would need divine intervention to survive an evening where half the court thought you were in love with the crown prince, and the other half thought you were plotting his death. The ballroom glittered. Hundreds of candles shimmered in gold sconces, making everything too bright, too perfect. Every rustle of silk felt like judgment. Every whispered laugh was a dagger. I straightened my spine. "Smile, Arya," I murmured to myself. "Pretend you aren't mentally composing your obituary." "Talking to yourself again, Duchess." I turned, and there he was, Duke Felix Arson. My husband. The man whose resting expression looked like he was plotting 10 murders and a hostile takeover before dessert. He wore black as usual, his silver cravat pinned with a deep blue gem that caught the light every time he breathed. And he did breathe, thank the gods, though the man managed to make even that look strategic. "Felix," I said, schooling my tone into chilly indifference, "you startled me." He arched a brow. "You're holding an empty glass. Either you're nervous or you've taken up invisible drinking." "I'm hydrating," I said sweetly, "on courage." "Ah," his lips curved just slightly. "And how much courage have you consumed tonight?" "Not nearly enough to tolerate you." Pity. I was hoping you'd be properly intoxicated before the crown prince arrives." That made me choke on absolutely nothing. He knew, of course he knew. The last royal banquet had ended with a drunken Arya Klaus, the previous Arya, not me, supposedly throwing herself at the crown prince and declaring undying affection. Now the entire court assumed I was hopelessly in love with him. "Relax," Felix said, voice lower now. "I'm not jealous, just curious how you plan to survive this round of gossip without murdering anyone." "By pretending you don't exist," I muttered. He leaned in slightly, so close I could feel the faintest warmth of his breath against my temple. "Darling, you'd miss me." "No," I said, forcing my heartbeat back to normal, "but I'd enjoy the peace." He chuckled softly. "Careful, people might think you like me." Before I could retort, trumpets blared. The crown prince had entered. The room dipped into silence, all gleaming boots and bowed heads. He looked exactly as described in the novel, tall, regal, unbearably handsome in that tragic hero way, and completely, devastatingly unattainable. He smiled at the crowd, then his eyes flicked toward me. And lingered. I felt Felix stiffen beside me. Wonderful, perfect, just what I needed, romantic tension and possible homicide. The crown prince approached with a smooth politeness that made my stomach twist. "Duke Arson, Lady Arson, a pleasure." "Your Highness," Felix said, tone perfectly measured. "The pleasure is ours." Was it my imagination, or did his hand tighten possessively at my waist? The crown prince smiled, the kind of smile that hid razors. "I trust the Duchess is, well." "I'm thriving," I said, flashing a smile bright enough to blind the nearest gossip. Felix's voice darkened a fraction. "My wife always is." The prince's gaze flicked between us, amusement glinting. "You make quite the pair. One would almost think the rumors untrue." "What rumors?" Felix asked mildly. "Oh, only that your marriage is more tactical than tender." I inhaled sharply. Felix didn't even blink. He merely smiled, the slow, dangerous kind that could end wars or start them. "Your Highness," he said, "tactics are for the battlefield. I prefer victories." The crown prince's eyes narrowed, but his smile remained flawless. "Of course." He left us then, moving toward some cluster of nobles who didn't smell faintly of scandal. I exhaled shakily. "You antagonized the crown prince." Felix shrugged. "He started it." "That's not how kingdoms work." "Perhaps not," he said lightly, taking my hand. "But it's how marriages do." Before I could respond, the orchestra began a waltz. Felix tilted his head, the ghost of a smirk on his lips. "Dance with me, Duchess." "I'd rather wrestle a bear." "Tempting, but the bear doesn't own half your property." With a sigh worthy of sainthood, I took his hand. He led flawlessly. Of course he did, his gloved fingers firm at my back, his other hand guiding mine just enough to make it impossible to pull away. Around us, whispers stirred like smoke. "She looks different tonight," someone murmured. "More alive. Maybe villainesses have hearts after all." I ignored them, tried to focus on the music, on not falling in love with a man I was supposed to be planning to divorce. Felix leaned in as we turned. "They're watching," he murmured. "Smile." "I am smiling." "That's you're about to stab someone's smile." "I've only ever stabbed you emotionally," I whispered back. "Effective enough." His voice dropped, suddenly serious. "Don't let them see they can rattle you." I blinked. "You actually care." He looked down at me, eyes softer than I'd ever seen. "Someone has to." The waltz ended. Applause swelled. He bowed slightly, his gaze never leaving mine. And for one dizzying moment, I almost forgot this was supposed to be a fake marriage. Almost. By morning, half the kingdom had apparently witnessed my scandalous affair with the crown prince. The other half was too busy writing ballads about it. I knew it was bad the moment my maid, Clara, entered my room looking like she'd swallowed a lemon. "Duchess, there are rumors." "There are always rumors," I said, dunking a croissant into my tea with deliberate calm. "Which one is it this time? That I killed a man with my beauty, or that I married the Duke for his library?" Clara bit her lip. "Neither, my lady. It's the crown prince." I froze mid-croissant dunk. "Oh, for heaven's sake." "Apparently, you gazed at him during the waltz as if he hung the moon." I wasn't gazing. I was blinking dramatically. "And his grace." "What about him?" "He looked like he was planning a duel." That I believed. I sighed and set down my tea. "Clara, fetch my black gloves." "Why?" "Because I'm going to the study," I said grimly, "and I might need to strangle my husband." The Duke's study was exactly as dramatic as the man himself. Dark wood, low light, and at least 3 hidden compartments I'd already discovered by accident. Felix was at his desk, signing documents with military precision. He didn't look up when I entered. "Good morning, Duchess." His voice was smooth as ever, though his jaw tightened slightly. "I trust you've enjoyed the attention." "Ah, yes," I said sweetly. "Nothing delights me more than being accused of seducing the future monarch." He set his quill down. "You danced with him." "I danced with you." "After you smiled at him." "I smile at everyone." He looked up finally, eyes dark with something I couldn't quite name. "Not like that." The room went quiet. My pulse decided to do the can-can. "Felix," I said carefully, "you're not seriously jealous of the crown prince, are you?" His lips curved, not quite a smile, more like a confession disguised as mockery. "Jealous? Of a man who hides behind etiquette and hair oil? Never." "Then why are you glaring holes into my soul?" He rose from his chair, slow and deliberate, every movement annoyingly graceful. "Because," he said, walking toward me, "you seem to have forgotten the first rule of survival in this court." "Oh, and what's that?" His gaze locked with mine. "Don't make me look like a fool." I blinked. "You're doing that quite well on your own." For a moment, he looked genuinely startled. Then he laughed. Not his polished court chuckle. A real laugh, rough and warm and utterly unguarded. "Gods, Arya, you'll be the death of me." "Good," I said, crossing my arms. "Then we'll be even." The corner of his mouth twitched. "You're impossible." "Flattery won't save you." He stepped closer. "It might if I mean it." My heart forgot its life choices again. "Felix, are you flirting with me?" "Depends. Is it working?" "I haven't decided." He smiled, that rare, devastating smile that made him look almost kind. "Then take your time, Duchess. I'm a patient man." I hated how my chest tightened at that. Hated how his words always sounded half like a promise and half like a warning. "I have work to do," I muttered, turning toward the door. "Of course," he said easily. "Do try not to make eye contact with any more royals today." I spun around. "You're insufferable." He gave a slight bow. "It's part of my charm." Later that day, the scandal deepened, because of course it did. At lunch, one of the duchesses leaned across the table and whispered, "My dear, Rumor has it the Crown Prince plans to call on you personally. I choked on my soup. Felix, across the table, didn't even flinch. He merely dabbed his mouth with his napkin and said, "If His Highness visits, I'll ensure the guards are armed." The table went silent. "Felix," I hissed once we were alone, "you can't threaten royalty." "I didn't," he said innocently. "I merely encouraged preparedness." "You sound like you're planning a coup." He leaned back, folding his arms. "Would that make you finally respect me?" "Felix," I said slowly, "I respect you exactly as much as one respects a well-dressed thunderstorm." He grinned. "And yet you keep walking into the rain." That night I couldn't sleep. Partly because of the rumors, mostly because of him. He'd been distant lately, sharper, quieter. But when we danced last night, there'd been something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Something raw. I went to the balcony for air, wrapping my shawl around my shoulders. Below, the courtyard shimmered with frost and moonlight. I didn't hear him approach until he spoke softly behind me. Still thinking about the Crown Prince. I turned. He was standing at the doorway, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly disheveled, unfairly handsome. Still jealous. He walked closer, gaze steady. "You enjoy testing me, don't you?" "Maybe." He stopped just a breath away, voice low. "Careful, Arya, you might win." "Win what?" He smiled faintly. "My undoing." For once, I had no witty retort, just the sound of the wind and the thunder of my own heartbeat. And somewhere deep inside me, I knew this was how it started. Not with hate, not with tragedy, but with quiet chaos. With a man who was supposed to ruin me. And might in fact save me instead. By morning, I had a plan. Not a good one. Not even a reasonable one. But desperate times, as they say, call for making your husband regret ever marrying a dramatist. If the world insisted on painting me as a scheming temptress obsessed with the Crown Prince, then fine. I'd simply rebrand. I would no longer be the wicked Duchess who tried to steal royalty. No. I would be the elegant, misunderstood patroness of the arts, with slightly homicidal tendencies. Clara, my eternally exhausted maid, looked skeptical as I paced the room. "You're going to host a charity gala." "Yes." "For orphans." "Yes." "And invite every person who's ever gossiped about you." "Precisely." She blinked. "That sounds less like a charity gala and more like a public execution." I smiled sweetly. Both involve food, music, and the chance to witness me destroy people socially. Clara sighed. "Shall I alert His Grace?" "Absolutely not." Because Felix would either mock me for the idea or make it better. And that was infinitely worse. Of course, he found out anyway. Because apparently, privacy is a luxury one forfeits upon marrying a duke who has more spies than a crime syndicate. He strolled into the drawing room later that evening, holding a glass of wine and looking insufferably pleased with himself. "I hear you're planning a charity gala," he said mildly. "I am." "For orphans?" "Yes." He leaned against the mantelpiece. "And how exactly does that repair your reputation?" "By proving I have a heart," I snapped. He considered that a risky claim. "Felix." He laughed, a low, warm sound that curled around the room. "I'm teasing, Arya, mostly." "Mostly." He approached, eyes glinting with amusement. "You do realize that everyone who attends will come expecting a scandal." "Then I'll give them one," I said, crossing my arms. He raised a brow. "You'll what?" "I'll act nice." He blinked. "You mean to tell me your master plan for reputation repair is manners?" "I'll even compliment the duchesses who hate me most." He smiled slowly, like a cat spotting a very entertaining mouse. "Now this I must see." "Felix, I swear." "Oh no, my dear, I fully support this endeavor." He tilted his head, pretending to ponder. "In fact, I insist on helping." "Helping how?" "By attending, of course. At your side, arm in arm, looking deeply in love." I gaped. "You will not." He smirked. You want to silence rumors, don't you? What better way than to appear hopelessly devoted to your wicked husband? I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it, because damn it, he wasn't wrong. Fine, I said through gritted teeth, but you will behave. Darling, he said with a mock bow, I never behave. The night of the gala arrived like the calm, before a delightful disaster. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, musicians, and far too many nobles pretending to like each other. I stood at the top of the staircase in a crimson gown, a deliberate choice. If they wanted a villainess, I'd dress the part. Felix was beside me, wearing black and gold, the picture of noble perfection. Unfortunately, he also looked smug. Try not to terrify anyone, I murmured. I'll do my best, he said, though your dress might do that for me. I shot him a glare. Flattery won't save you. It wasn't flattery, he said softly. It was awe. And just like that, my heartbeat forgot how to function. We descended the stairs together, and for one glorious moment, the gossiping ceased. Every eye followed us. Every whisper turned into stunned silence. Felix leaned close, his breath brushing my ear. They're staring at you. Good. Mostly because they're terrified you'll kill them. Better. He chuckled, low and genuine. My wicked Duchess indeed. The night unfolded surprisingly well. I smiled, I curtsied, I complimented. I even refrained from threatening anyone with my champagne flute. And then the crown prince himself arrived. Of course he did. He approached, all polite smiles and golden hair. Duchess Arya, you look radiant tonight. Your Highness, I said, performing a perfect curtsy. How kind of you to attend. Felix's hand tightened on my waist. The prince's gaze flicked between us, clearly sensing the chill in the air. And Duke Arson, always a pleasure. Felix smiled, charming and lethal. The pleasure, I assure you, is mutual. Translation: try anything, and I'll bury you behind the rose gardens. The prince coughed. I must say, Duchess, I was impressed by your generosity tonight. Thank you, I said, ignoring the way Felix's thumb brushed slow circles on my back, a subtle warning. Or maybe a distraction, probably both. When the prince finally drifted away, I turned to Felix. Was that entirely necessary? He looked unapologetic. You invited a man who once confessed his admiration for you. What did you expect me to do? Not threaten royalty. He leaned in, voice low and dangerous. I didn't threaten him. I simply reminded him that you're mine. My breath hitched. Yours. He smiled faintly, in the most inconvenient, hopeless way imaginable. My brain fizzled. My heart staged a rebellion. Felix. He caught my hand, brushing his lips over my knuckles. Dance with me, Duchess. And just like that, the room vanished. There was only him, the man who ruined reputations with a smile and set mine aflame with a glance. As we danced, I realized that maybe, just maybe, repairing my reputation wasn't the battle I thought it was. Because the real war was the one in my chest. And I was already losing. The morning after the gala was suspiciously quiet. And in my life, quiet was never good news. It usually meant one of two things. A, someone was plotting against me. B, my husband was plotting with me, which was somehow worse. I was halfway through my tea when Felix entered the breakfast room, impeccably dressed, infuriatingly composed, and looking like he'd slept perfectly fine, which was unacceptable, given I had not slept at all. Good morning, Duchess, he said smoothly. Don't Duchess me, I muttered. You made half the nobles in that ballroom faint with jealousy last night. He poured himself coffee, utterly unrepentant. Ah, yes, I do recall the moment when Lady Winslet dropped her fan and her dignity. You kissed my hand for a full minute, Felix. Correction, he said calmly. I kissed it twice. The first time was to start rumors, the second was to end them. I stared. That doesn't even make sense. He sipped his coffee. It doesn't have to, it worked. And damn him, it had. Overnight, the headlines had transformed. Duchess Arson's redemption arc. From wicked to winsome, a miraculous transformation. Duke and Duchess, love or elaborate blackmail scheme. Progress, I suppose. Still, there was something different about him that morning. He was smiling, yes, but not his usual smirk. This one was softer, quieter, almost fond. "Stop looking at me like that," I grumbled. "Like what?" "Like I'm a puzzle you've just solved." He leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand. "I assure you, Arya, if I'd solved you, I'd be far more smug about it." I rolled my eyes. "I'm beginning to think you enjoy annoying me." "Beginning," he feigned surprise. "Darling, I married you for it." I sputtered on my tea. "Excuse me." He grinned, wolfish and dazzling. "Oh, don't look so scandalized. You're much more interesting when you're furious." "Then I must be fascinating to you constantly," I said sweetly. He chuckled, standing, undeniably. And then, before I could process it, he brushed a stray curl behind my ear, a small, casual gesture that felt far too intimate for breakfast conversation. "Felix," I said softly, "what are you doing?" "Making a poor decision," he murmured. That should have been my first clue, that things were about to spiral. By afternoon, chaos had once again taken up permanent residence in my life. The steward burst into my study, pale and trembling. "Your Grace, the Crown Prince, he's requested an audience." "An audience," I frowned, "with me." "With both you and His Grace." "Of course, because peace is for people who aren't married into Gothic soap operas." Felix appeared moments later, already informed somehow. I suspect his butler is part demon. "Well, my dear, it seems our little gala has caught royal attention." "Is that good?" I asked hesitantly. "That depends." He tilted his head. "Did you happen to insult any royal cousins last night?" "Only Lady Seraphine." He smirked. "Excellent, she deserved it." We met the Crown Prince in the Grand Hall, a vision of nobility and polished charm that made me deeply suspicious. "Duke, Duchess," he greeted warmly. "Last night's event was impressive." "Thank you, Your Highness," I said, curtsying. "I must say," he continued, "I didn't expect such harmony between you two." Felix smiled pleasantly. "Even villains can surprise you." The prince laughed, though his gaze lingered on me a little too long. "Indeed, Duchess Arya, you seem changed." "Marriage does that," I replied. Felix's hand found mine, squeezing lightly, a silent easy now. "Ah, love," the prince mused, "it suits you." I smiled tightly. "So does survival." He blinked. Felix's smile widened. "My wife is a poet when provoked." "Poet, assassin, same thing," I muttered. Felix bit back a laugh. The moment the prince departed, I exhaled. Well, that was exhausting. Felix turned to me, amusement flickering in his eyes. "You're lucky I find your sarcasm charming." "Charming? You mean dangerous?" "Same thing." I looked at him, really looked. The sharpness, the wit, the maddening calm, and beneath it all something softer, something real. "Felix," I said quietly. He blinked. "I like you." He froze. "I mean, not in a tragic sonnet kind of way, but you know what I mean. You're." "Arya." His voice was low, steady, too steady. I dared to look up. He was staring at me like I'd just pulled the sun out of my pocket and handed it to him. "Say that again," he said. "Don't push it." "Say it." I swallowed. "I like you, you arrogant menace." For a long, unbearable moment, he said nothing. Then he laughed, quietly, disbelievingly, the kind of laugh that made my chest ache. "Arya Klaus," he murmured, stepping closer, "you are going to be the death of me." "Good," I whispered, "then we'll be even." And then, because apparently I hadn't embarrassed myself enough, I kissed him. It wasn't planned. It wasn't elegant. It was clumsy and impulsive and real. He didn't move at first. Then his hand slid to my waist, pulling me closer, returning the kiss with quiet reverence and just a hint of mischief. When we finally broke apart, breathless and dazed, he smiled faintly. "Now that," he said softly, "is a scandal worth keeping." And for once, I didn't disagree. It began, as all terrible ideas in my life do, with breakfast. Felix was calmly buttering toast while I was packing the floor, waving a list of names that would make any sane person faint. "Do you realize," I hissed, "that this is literally treason?" He didn't even look up. "Only if we fail, darling." "Felix." He took a sip of his tea. "Arya, we are not overthrowing the monarchy." He tilted his head. "Technically, I never said overthrow. I said reorganize. It's called diplomacy when the Duke does it." "Diplomacy doesn't involve bribing half the military." "It's not bribery if they like me." I groaned, sinking into the chair across from him. "We were supposed to clear our names, not make new charges." Felix finally set down his knife and gave me that infuriatingly calm smile. "We were supposed to survive, remember? And now that the royal family has decided to use us as scapegoats, survival requires creativity." The problem was, he wasn't wrong. The Crown Prince had begun quietly spreading rumors that the Duke and Duchess of Arson were the ones leaking royal secrets. It was a convenient narrative. Two already infamous people accused of corruption. The court devoured it. We could either die as villains, or live as villains who took control of the board. And thus, the coup that wasn't supposed to be a coup began. It started small. Felix reassigned a few soldiers loyal to the crown into his personal guard. I accidentally hosted tea parties where noble ladies complained about taxes while signing harmless petitions. Somehow, in the middle of this chaos, we also started flirting more than plotting. At one point, I threw a quill at him during an argument about strategy. He caught it midair, smirking. "Such passion, my love. Keep it up and I'll start a revolution just to impress you." "You already are," I snapped. "Then at least I'm on theme." By the time the first snow fell, the impossible had happened. People whispered that the Duke and Duchess were heroes of the people, defenders of the realm, not destroyers. The same nobles who once crossed the street to avoid me were suddenly sending gifts and proposals for alliance. One night, we were in the war room, which was a very dramatic name for Felix's study, surrounded by maps and candlelight. I stared at him across the table. "Do you ever think about what happens after?" He looked up. "After what?" "After we win, or lose, or whatever this is." He leaned back, eyes gleaming in the dim light. "If we win, I'll rebuild the empire. If we lose, I'll make sure they never touch you." "Felix." He smiled faintly. "If this world insists on making us villains, then let's be the kind that end happy." The coup, I refuse to call it anything else, happened almost by accident. The royal treasury collapsed after Felix exposed the corruption that had been buried for decades. The guards switched sides because half of them owed their promotions to him. And the people, they wanted change. By the time the Crown Prince realized what was happening, his loyal Duke had already become the kingdom's quiet ruler. I stood beside Felix on the palace balcony the next morning, watching the dawn break over a city that was somehow still standing. He looked at me, voice soft but steady. "We didn't mean to rule, you know." I laughed, breath misting in the cold air. "Oh, I definitely meant it a little." His grin turned wicked. "Of course you did." I nudged him. "So, what now, your grace of everything?" He turned toward me, eyes crinkling. "Now, we live, we rest. Maybe even dance without plotting treason for once. And if they write us as villains in the next history book." He brushed a strand of hair from my cheek, smiling that dangerous, beautiful smile. "Then let them. Every good story needs a villain." I leaned into him, lips brushing his jaw. "Then I suppose it's a good thing we're such unforgettable ones." He laughed, really laughed, and kissed me as the bells of the capital rang for their new rulers. Not tyrants, not monsters. Just a duke and duchess who accidentally conquered the world. And fell hopelessly, stupidly in love doing it. The bells of the capital still echo that day. Some say it was the sound of rebellion. Others, the sound of two fools finally finding peace. They'll write their names with suspicion, with awe, with scandal. The wicked duke and his villainous wife. The couple who laughed in the face of fate and rewrote it anyway. But if you ask me, it was never a coup. It was just love, messy, loud, and terribly inconvenient. And maybe that's how every story worth remembering begins. If you want to see what happens after the crown falls. Their rule, their chaos, their impossible happy ending. Comment part 2 below. Because between us, I don't think there's story done yet.